Imagine not being able to have a full night's sleep for over 5 years, having heart palpitation, headaches, and a feeling that you are going to die. That is my next guest story. Bret Ullman is a parent and youth expert and speaker, but about 5 years ago, his life drastically changed. Thanks for being with us today, Bret.
Thanks for having me.
So March 1st, 2012, your life changes. Tell us about that day.
It did. So I was a teacher. I taught with the Toronto District School Board for about a decade and left that to go into speaking full-time and immediately did something called the Aero Leadership Program, which was a great leadership program out of BC, and then finished that and went right into a master's degree down at Wheaton Grad School in Chicago. And so suddenly I found myself speaking, not the 125 speaking dates that I'm doing, but about 275 to 300 a year to pay for it. I'm an international student. I once spoke 14 times in 32 days.
Wow.
Sorry, 32 times in 14 days. Like
wow.
Literally 3 or 4 talks a day. And I remember kind of thinking, oh, I could pay for my food or I paid for my flight. But my friends, my mentors, my family were saying, like, you're burning out. You can't do this. And I just kept saying, March 1st, if I can just make it to there, I'll be okay. And I made it. I got to there. I graduated February 28th. And that was, the next morning was the last time I'd ever had slept, because I stopped sleeping. Basically, I'd be up every few hours and it got worse and worse. And then from there, I began to have, well, I was at a church, and I think it was Woodstock, and in the middle of my talk, I began to feel like I was going to pass out. Now, I speak very quickly when I talk, but this wasn't that. This was like in the middle of my talk, snow kind of came into my vision, and I thought to myself, how do I, like, do I just fall down? Like, I'm 6'6", like, do I just fall onto the ground? Like, what do I do? And then I was fine, and then I wasn't. I was touring Catholic schools in Windsor, and I found myself crying in my car one morning, and I remember going, I'm not okay. And then it all kind of came to head. I was speaking and staying for a week at Lakeshore Pentecostal Camp and went boating with some friends for the day. And coming out of McDonald's that night, I thought I was being hit by a car, but I was actually falling into the parked car.
Wow.
And my dizziness had somehow taken me kind of that far. My wife walked me back to my car, back to the cottage. I didn't leave the cottage, and then I didn't leave my house for months and didn't work for a year. And so it's been I've been back to work now for 4 years, but still dealing with the struggles that I've had since then.
And you sought out a diagnosis, and what did your doctors say?
Well, my medical doctor quickly pushed me off to specialists, like my general doctor. And so counselors, specialists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and I mean, my diagnoses are a mix of anxiety disorder, panic disorder. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, depression, and all those things kind of feed off of one another as well. So, but I kind of have those diagnoses right now.
And what was that day like when you heard, and it was probably over a number of days that you heard about all these diagnoses, what was going through your mind as you got this news?
Well, I think there's irony for me in that I'm a full-time speaker who speaks on mental health and being told that I'm now struggling with the same things. Like, I remember even at the camp trying to walk past I was at a cottage, and 3 cottages down, I'd start to shake. And I thought, oh, I'm not feeling well. And then about 2 or 3 days in, I remember kind of laughing, a little bit crying, kind of going, this is anxiety. And so getting the diagnosis, I think I already knew it by then, but it's just, you don't want to hear those things, ever.
Yeah. And what does anxiety mean? What does that look like in Bret Ullman's life?
It's just, you don't, sometimes I say to my wife, it's not living life, it's kind of struggling through the day. I'm trying to survive. So even coming today like this, it's kind of like, do I have enough energy? Do I have enough, what do I need to take a little bit of Ativan before I come on stage? And today I'm doing okay, which is great. But it's always wondering if you'll be okay. And then also because I don't sleeplessness causes anxiety, anxiety causes sleeplessness. So it's kind of this never-ending cycle that you go through. And
being a believer, what kind of conversations did you have with God as all of these diagnoses came up?
It's an interesting question. I would say that, like anyone else who goes from being well, whatever that means, to unwell, you ask why. Because I think Larry Crabb in one of his books talks about, especially we as Christians believe that A plus B equals C. If we're Christians and we're doing God's work, then we'll be okay.
Yeah.
But that's not true, right? Life happens to all of us. And so I think I asked why a lot. And then after a while, I stopped asking why and really just looked at the idea of what do I do with where I'm at.
And where you're at means, as you mentioned, hundreds of panic attacks that you've had. And what is that like? And describe what panic attacks feels like.
So I stopped counting at 250.
Wow.
I don't even know why I was counting, but I think a panic attack, if people don't know, it's kind of like someone takes a grenade and throws it in your body, but the explosion's more your emotions. And it's just like, and so, you know, heart palpitations, goosebumps, everything's just, it's the true fight or flight. You just want to get out of whatever's happening. So it was 3 weeks ago, I was at a Blue Jays game. We got given tickets, my wife and I, it was great seats. And when we began, I was okay, and every inning my anxiety got higher. And not because the Blue Jays weren't doing well, which they weren't doing well.
Yeah.
But as it kind of grew, I could feel myself, so suddenly I'm doing like belly breathing, which is what you do when, you know, your anxiety is high. And I could feel myself kind of getting worse. And by the 7th, I said to my wife, I need to go. And so we left, and right outside the Rogers Center is the Ripley's Aquarium, and that's kind of where I hit my full panic attack. And I didn't know if I needed to just sit down right in the ground. I could barely see, can barely breathe, and I feel like I'm going to pass out. And so that's kind of how it goes. It's the true fight or flight, and you just want to kind of get away.
We're going to continue this conversation with Bret Ullman, and when we come back, we're going to talk about his continuing journey with mental health illness, as well as his relationship with God and what that looks like. Stay with us. We'll be right back.